Hello again. So, we'll continue where we left off. And last time we started talking about the point that has to do with transforming all the difficult situations in our life into the path, which wouldn't it be lovely? We are faced with suffering, something goes wrong in our life, we transform that into spiritual growth, and we just keep growing and moving on. And that's lovely. That's a lovely idea. We just need the tools for that. And in a way, one analogy that could be given is that we need so many tools that it almost becomes like a flower with multiple petals. That's the image I like to use. And when we're faced with suffering, we can pick one of those petals. It would say something like karma, compassion, refuge, renunciation, wisdom, loving kindness. And when we will use that specific quality to deal with our problematic experiences. So sometimes we would be faced with suffering, and we would use that suffering as a catalyst for compassion, for ourselves, for everyone else. Even if we just invest time into self-compassion, that's very powerful. Let alone if we start thinking about others and thinking, wow, there's so many beings right now that are also going through similar types of pain, anguish, discomfort. So I'll open up my heart to them as well. I'll invite them to this sense of us being interconnected. I'll connect to them, and even if they are not participating in it consciously, they will be sort of my guests. That's the phrase that's used in some prayers. We are inviting all beings as our guests because we're extending our compassion to them. And then with that, I will be able to grow my compassion slowly. So that's a good practice to begin with. We might be feeling quite tired by now. I know I am. And we'll put some compassion on it. We'll project some compassion towards ourselves and towards others. So please find a comfortable stationary position for that. And if you prefer to lie down and meditate on compassion in a lovely Shavasana, I'll be jealous, but happy for you, honestly. The same goes, of course, for everyone who's watching this online or by means of a recording. And this is a wonderful opportunity to simply revisit our body, return to our body, find a comfortable point of stillness there by attending to the experiences in our hands and fingers, releasing all the movement, and then just enjoying that sense of stillness as it spreads throughout our body. Simply releasing all the types of tension with each exhalation and allowing our body to find greater and greater degrees of rest. And in this exploration, releasing tension not just from our hands and fingers, of course, but also from our feet and toes, our pelvic floor, our face, our chest, so that every part of the body can find a deep degree of restful ease. With our body resting in this manner, we can briefly revisit our highest aspirations for contemplative practice in general and for this specific session of learning, of practice, of reflection. Orienting all of our effort in that direction. And with that as the foundation, we orient our mind towards this very person practicing here, towards ourselves. And in holding ourselves in awareness, we add this feeling or this element or this note of tender, affectionate care. So we're not simply aware of ourselves, we're aware of ourselves with an element of warm caring. As if our awareness was holding this person, that is us, in a warm, affectionate embrace. And in attending to ourselves through this lens of affectionate tenderness or caring or warmth, we can perhaps notice that there are certain elements of discomfort that we're experiencing right now. Some experiences that are not, in our own perception, perfectly optimal or perfectly pleasurable. And we can very gently discern them in the overall field of our awareness, in the bubble of our experiences. Of course, along with the deeper concerns that we might have about our life in general, and all of our lifetimes for that matter. And with regards to these moments of discomfort and their causes, we can generate a powerful wish of self-compassion, meaning the wish that says, may I be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I be free, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And so as we breathe naturally, we allow these waves of compassion to rock us back and forth, soothing through the energy of this wish our nervous system, our heart, our mind, our body. As if this wish of compassion was a force field gently holding and healing us. And then, as if expanding this force field so that it can include others, healing them as well, we extend our awareness to others around us, physically or digitally. We recognize their wish to be free, their basic goodness, their potential for freedom. And then we wish, may we be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then equally opening it up to everyone, all beings who deep within themselves want to be free of suffering and its causes, including the existential suffering. May all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. As if everyone was basking in this boundless field of gentle soothing, gentle healing. Then releasing this wish to simply rest in the afterglow of that, in a state without a particular reference point. And slowly coming back to our body, mentally dedicating the energy of this meditation to our highest goals and aspirations, to the freedom and happiness of all beings. And then introducing some movement to the body, rocking back and forth, moving our fingers and our hands. And slowly concluding. So thank you for showing up, despite all the tiredness. Hoping to make this meaningful, but please be gentle with yourself in terms of relaxing, taking it easy, making sure you're physically comfortable, have enough liquid and all that. So, as I've mentioned before the meditation, we are talking now about the third point, using unfavorable circumstances as aids to awakening. And we covered its first part, transforming with our thoughts concerning our behavior. And the sequence or the string of aphorisms there, or Lojong slogans there, said, when the environment and its dwellers are full of negative forces, transform adverse conditions into a path to enlightenment by banishing one thing, my self-cherishing attitude, as bearing all blame and meditating with great kindness toward everyone. So we started with this idea of how in the Lojong tradition there is a concept of two enemies or a twofold enemy, or just one enemy that's to blame for everything, but that enemy consists of two mental states. One of them is self-grasping or self-clinging, and that is our mistaken concept of an inherently existent self, or simply our misunderstanding of the nature of ourself. We grasp onto it because we think it really exists. We think, oh, deep within me there's some little being that's pressing all the buttons, and that being needs to be protected and cherished, and it is separate from the rest of reality, and that's the true me, and I am there. So that view, that perception is the so-called self-clinging, but then it acquires an additional level of protection, and that additional level of protection is the so-called self-cherishing or self-centeredness, which is a mental state that says, my happiness is more important than anyone else's in the world. Quite literally. You will all be happy if only you listen to me. Everyone would live better if universe was organized the way I want it to be organized. So when we actually start spelling out the thoughts that this self-cherishing brings to us, they are ridiculous, conceptually speaking. We would be ashamed of having anyone hear them if we consider ourselves to be a civilized individual, because these are thoughts like, I should always win, I'm always right, everyone else is always wrong, my perception of reality is always correct, you have opinions and I have the truth. I've actually heard that from someone once. Fascinating. So when we think about such things as medically diagnosed personality disorders associated with narcissism, with sociopathy, with psychopathy, and so forth, we're talking about this same mental state, but in a degree where it has become so large and so powerful, it has hijacked everything else that's in the mind, and it quite powerfully controls everything. It runs the situation. What runs the situation is not the self, because the self from the Buddhist point of view is a non-existent king, or certainly a king that does not exist in the way we believe that that king exists. Our beliefs about his existence or her existence are wrong. So it's not the self that's ruining the thing, it's our belief in the self, self-grasping, and then our belief that that self should be given all the goods, that self-cherishing. And not simply the self, our self needs to be given all the stuff, not anyone else's. We should worship this very self that's within me. So everything good should come to me, everything bad should be given to everyone else. To counteract that, we use the practice of Tonglen, and we use the preliminaries to Tonglen, to giving and taking, in which we mentally, that's something that we talked about before in this course, we mentally designate this body, this speech, and this mind, of which this person consists, as the tool, the instrument. We designate all other sentient beings as the object of service, those to whom we offer the service. And then we do that, not simply by resting in this changed perception, which is the basis of it. It's a cognitive training in replacing self and other, in exchanging self and other. That's the precondition for Tonglen proper. We do that not simply mentally, but actually through acts of service. We start practicing generosity on the basis of this attitude. We start practicing nonviolence on the basis of this attitude, and so forth. So we transform ourselves into an actual bodhisattva by perceiving the energies of our body, speech, and mind as a tool that can be offered to others. Even when we are studying, for example, we think, or we can think, we don't have to, but we can think, I am right now using the energy of my body, speech, and mind to perfect the instrument that I have, to perfect my intellect, to perfect my knowledge, to perfect my meditation, to perfect, if I'm studying something related to movement, to perfect my muscles and tendons and all of that, to perfect my flexibility and all of these different things. Why? So that this tool can be offered, so that through this tool, service could be offered to all sentient beings. But why would I want to offer that service? That's the crucial question here. It's not because I am a sacrificial lamb or I'm a martyr, or just like to suffer, ha 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 fun. Or not because any sort of omniscient, omnipotent deity said that I should do so. It does not accept a creator, and Buddha himself does not tell us what to do. He just tells us what he's discovered about reality, but he doesn't say you should. He says you can if you want to. But why would we want to? Well, because to the degree that we're able to do this, exchanging self and others and offering service, we would be able to remove the twofold enemy of self-grasping and self-cherishing. Why would we want that? To the degree that the two enemies are removed, we become happier, we suffer less. But on top of that, we become more capable of offering happiness and removing the suffering of others. So if we think of the beings that can truly give us happiness, there's two main strategies that are available to others in their service of us. Let's say they want to be an instrument for the benefit of all beings. So they're thinking, how can I benefit this person sitting here, for example? Let's say someone is an aspiring bodhisattva or an actual bodhisattva. They have cultivated some bodhicitta, some level of that wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of all beings. They were bending their mind towards love and compassion, and then out of love and compassion they wove, through the process of mental weaving, bodhicitta that wants to become a Buddha for the benefit of all beings, that wish. So they've gained that. They were doing lots of practice. Now they're looking at me and they're thinking, how can I benefit this miserable, wretched, sentient being that's so confused and, basically barely aware of what he's doing and how to gain happiness? Well, there's two ways. In one way is to just offer hedonic assistance. And yes, indeed, bodhisattvas might manifest as people who support us financially, emotionally, lending an ear, marrying someone to support them. Lots of ways to support hedonic well-being that are available, certainly. That's all good. But that's, once again, the parable or the aphorism about a fish and a fishing rod. Give someone fish, you feed them for a day. Give someone a fishing rod, you've fed them for a life. Not very vegan, that's aphorism, but kind of the logic still stands in that, yes, they can, these beings, offer us some hedonic assistance. That's very valuable. We do need food to practice, and emotional support, and medical care, and clothing, and shelter. But in the long run, how they benefit us is through teaching us the ways to make our mind happy, to liberate our mind from what's opposed to eudaimonic well-being, teaching us how to cultivate eudaimonic well-being, providing conditions for us to do all of that, building yoga studios and retreat centers and communities. And then at the end of the day, we do all of that and we gain eudaimonic well-being, which then also helps us navigate our hedonic well-being more skillfully, because we become less greedy, more content, less violent, more compassionate, less stupid, more intelligent, quite literally. That's one of the mental states that we also try to transform. And all of that comes because bodhisattvas, when they are in the path, blame everything on this great enemy of self-grasping and self-cherishing. They remove it, therefore gaining that ability to offer hedonic assistance, eudaimonic teaching. And they do that, and it's a never-ending cycle, because one bodhisattva teaches that to another, and they are all being guided by the Buddhas. And within this dance, when we look at this, our job is to use our suffering to gradually, slowly attenuate this type of grasping, self-grasping, and this type of selfishness, self-cherishing. Slowly, slowly. So one way to do that, that we've talked about in this first aphorism, is through Tonglen practice once again. But on top of that, we can simply use compassion. We suffer and we think, may I use this suffering to see how everyone is suffering and develop compassion. Even if it's just physical tiredness. How many millions, or how many of the 8 billion, which percentage of the 8 billion humans on this planet right now feels exhausted? Pretty high, I would say. We're all constantly underslept and sleep deprived and all of those sorts of things. So it's fairly safe to say there's at least a few 100,000, if not a few, well, actually, probably there's hundreds of millions of beings who are suffering from chronic stress right now, let alone who just want to take a nap. So, may we all be free from this suffering, and may we all enjoy the bliss of a good nap. So, that's actually already deeply meaningful. Shantideva says, and Shantideva, of course, is the grandfather of this specific teaching. It kind of is an essential presentation of what he very elaborately says in his text, Entry to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. Shantideva says that even the wish for all beings to not suffer from headache generates incredible virtue in our mind, incredible amounts of good karma, let alone the wish for beings to not suffer in any way whatsoever. That's mega powerful, all-encompassing compassion, immeasurably more powerful than the one that's related to headaches, but even that headache-related one is still very meaningful. So may everyone now feel revitalized, energized, energetic, taken care of, well-rested. May everyone gain the radiant rest that they need. Oof. And then the second part, transforming with our thoughts concerning our view, is fairly tricky. It's one that has to do with ultimate bodhicitta. And ultimate bodhicitta, as we have seen when we were going through the second point in this text, is a deep and profound thing. So ultimate bodhicitta, just to remind ourselves, is our wisdom with regards to the true nature of reality. Why is it also called bodhicitta? So we have two bodhicittas. Relative bodhicitta is simply the wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. It's a motivation that takes us to towards becoming a Buddha for the benefit of all beings. That is called bodhicitta because our mind is waking up to compassion, to interdependence, interconnectedness, to how much our happiness depends on the happiness of all beings. Bodhicitta literally means mind that is awakening, or awakening mind. So our mind is waking up to the compassion side of things. Ultimate bodhicitta is called so because our mind is waking up to the ultimate nature, bodhicitta. Chitta is mind, bodhi is awakening. Our mind is waking up to what? It's waking up to the true nature of reality, to emptiness, or to emptiness and luminosity combined, to selflessness. There are different words that denote that nature in Buddhism, but that's what our mind is waking up towards, and we need both to truly attain that awakening. Just compassion, not enough. Just wisdom, not enough either. We need the powerful fusion of the two. That's why we talk about two bodhicittas in union. So the first part of this point, the one that's about blaming it all on one thing, meditating with great kindness towards everyone, that's more in the compassion and kindness side. Different meditations on those things can be done there very powerfully and very beautifully. And everyone loves them because they're feel-good meditations. Loving kindness can be really powerful to rest in that. Because compassion can be really powerful to rest in that. And then, of course, it's powerful when it naturally manifests in our action. We see, I don't know, a bug that flew into the room and is beating against the glass, and we see, oh, it's confused. Let me help it. Because for at least on this level, we know what's confusion and what's clarity, The thing is, our mind is, we are exactly like that. We don't see it. We have super tunnel vision. But the bodhisattvas are seeing that we are just like that bug beating against the glass. Oh, why can't I gain happiness in my futile attempts to manipulate samsara? Well, because the window's there. And you're beating against the glass. That's what they see. So to help us see the window, they teach us ultimate bodhicitta, and here they offer a recipe for how to transform suffering into this ultimate bodhicitta. So I'll read it out. Voidness, that's another translation for emptiness. There are reasons for why Dr. Berzin translates it as voidness. They're kind of up for debate in a way, like everything is in the world of translations, but suffice it to say, it's simply to explain that emptiness is understood in Buddhism is not the same as emptiness of a cup. The cup is empty of tea. That's not the idea here. It's about emptiness of independent existence, or voidness of independent existence. But voidness from meditating on deceptive appearances as the four Buddha bodies is the peerless protector. So we talked about deceptive appearances when we were talking about ultimate bodhicitta in general. We talked about how there are these practices for looking around and learning to see everything that appears within our personal projection bubble, our personal bubble of experiences, learning to see that as if it were like a dream. not to become detached from reality and then jump from a window. Not at all that. We know this is like a dream, but this dream has a different set of rules. In a regular dream, also known as the dream of double delusion, we can walk through walls and jump from windows when we gain lucidity. Lucid dreaming allows for all those things to happen. In this dream, of course, were we to become a fully awakened Buddha, we could fly through the sky and all these sorts of things. The Buddha certainly was no alien to miracles and things like that, just like all the other great, spiritual practitioners of the past, walking on water and things like that. Lucidity does allow for those things to happen. But at this stage, we're not yet there. What we can, however, see is how all of these appearances are holographic reflections of reality constructed by our mind. And like any holographic reflection, they are a limited idea of what's truly there. For example, if I'm looking at each one of you, and then I look at the holographic appearance of you along with all my ideas of who you are, what you might be feeling, what your personal history is, of course, my ridiculous little dumb thoughts would never capture the totality of what you are. And neither will any thought, and neither will any conceptual construct. My thoughts cannot catch the totality of the flavor of the tea that I'm drinking, or the shape of this phone, or the colors on the screen, anything. They're helpful, just like a moon pointing towards the moon is helpful. Practically speaking, it is pointing towards the moon, mission accomplished. But what needs to always be present there for ultimate bodhicitta to slowly unfold is humility about how accurate these concepts are. In a dream, everything is confusing us, and everything is made from mind's energy. In the waking reality, all of these appearances are also made from mind's energy, and they're also contaminated by our ignorance. So we're only seeing small glimpses of what's truly there. That's fine, but not to be arrogant about it, meaning not to think, I have the truth. Because we know even our human senses are so limited. A cat might perceive way more in this room, or a dog, because some of their senses are much more powerful than ours, and they see a different fraction of reality. And another animal would see a different fraction of reality. And let's say a divine being, or God, someone who's reborn as a god, in Buddhist philosophy, that's a thing, they would see a different fraction of this reality. We could be all looking in this room, having very different perception of it, and then thinking our unique perception is the only correct one. But were we to apply this intellectual humility, we would understand, oh, no, I'm just seeing a tiny slice of what's truly there. And even that I'm kind of seeing very, 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 with not much clarity, let's put it that way. So that's the deceptive appearances, but how do we meditate on them as four Buddha bodies? And how is that the peerless protector? Well, what's the peerless protector is truly understanding emptiness. So actually, were we to master emptiness through doing the meditations on ultimate bodhicitta that we were discussing before, starting with seeing all phenomena as being like a dream, and then going through that whole sequence, which can be practiced in retreat or in our daily life for many years. It's a very incremental, gradual, slow process of training. Were we to do that, we would gain an understanding of emptiness, and then eventually a realization of emptiness. That would be the peerless protector. But here we're offered an additional recipe for meditating on specifically suffering through that lens. And so how is that applied here? In this specific teaching, there are other strategies taught in other texts. So first of all, we need to establish what are the four Buddha bodies, if you haven't heard of them before. In the Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, it is said that when one becomes a Buddha, so fully wakes up, full awakening, full unzombification happens, and then what do you gain? You fully not get a glimpse, not a temporary realization, but full state of Buddhahood where all the delusions are removed and all the positive mental states fully uncovered. Such a being does not cease to exist. Buddhas do not disappear. And on contrary, they actually exist more fully than any of us, because all the limitations to their existence have been removed. And so they gain the so-called four bodies, or three bodies, or five bodies. But these are not, we should not mistakenly compare them to these yogic or esoteric descriptions of astral body, mental body, etheric body, and so forth. That's not what it's talking about here. Body here is used to denote a collection of something, so a corpus, body in the Latin sense of that word. But what is it a collection of? So the first of those bodies is called the body of truth, or Dharmakaya, the body of Dharma. What is the Dharmakaya? Very simply put, Dharmakaya is the omniscient mind of a Buddha. So the mind that we have right now, when it removes all of its ignorance, and because we have removed ignorance, all these derivative afflictions will also be removed. When that fully happens to the ultimate level, our regular mind becomes the omniscient mind of a Buddha. Omniscient in that it knows everything at the same time, and it has no obstacles to cognition. And it's also infinitely loving and compassionate because it fully understands interdependence. So for it, love and compassion are uncontrived. It doesn't need to sit down and think, may you be happy, may you be happy. It's just naturally there because it feels inseparable from everyone. And also it has no self-doubt or self-hatred. So it doesn't need to cultivate loving kindness towards itself either. Why would it? It knows its infinite potential. I guess when you are omniscient and all-loving, you don't have problems loving yourself. That seems logical. Okay, I'm a Buddha. Now I can finally love myself, So they possess that. And then the third aspect, which is similar to a Christian presentation, but there's one crucial difference there. The third aspect of that mind is that it's all skillful. It possesses ultimate skillfulness. When Christians describe the qualities of God, and that's sometimes used in the Catholic tradition, God is described as all-knowing, all-loving, or all-merciful, and all-omnipotent. The difference here with the Buddhas is that the Buddha's Dharmakaya is all-knowing. It knows everything that can be known. It is all-loving, all-compassionate. But the third thing is that a Buddha is not omnipotent in that a Buddha cannot enter my field of awareness and change it from within. He cannot magically make me enlightened through clicking his fingers. A God, were God to be truly omnipotent, would be able to do that. That would be within what omnipotence is. But the Buddha is not omnipotent. Rather, instead of omnipotence, Buddha possesses infinite skillfulness in guiding me towards awakening. He has an infinite amount of tricks in his pocket, so to say, and using those tricks over trillions of lifetimes, he can slowly and gently take me towards full awakening. And he does that within the parameters of my own karmic situation. I do not have the karma for Buddha to appear in front of me in a shining body of light, whack me on the head and make me enlightened. Some beings do have that karma and that happens to them. When that genuinely happens. We're not talking about mental delusion and things like that. But some beings do have the karma to be the direct disciples of a Buddha in a specific historical age. So some beings were reborn in the times of Buddha Shakyamuni 2,500 years ago, became his direct disciples, heard one verse of teaching from him, or one line, gained nirvana right there and then, and boom, you graduate. You can have all the fun you want. I, from my own side, did not create those karmic causes. Does that mean I'm hopeless? No. Even for lost cases like me, for hopeless cases like me, the Buddha has an infinite amount of tricks and candy in his pocket. The difference is that those beings were pulled by the Buddha powerfully. You can read about that in the stories of his disciples. They traveled across, they heard his name, traveled across India, found him, heard that one verse that was suitable to them, gained enlightened. Similar things happen to masters and disciples all across the different traditions and in different historical ages and so on. Someone would hear the name of a specific realized guru and they would travel across the world and meet that guru, and boom, there you go. In our day and age as well, Ram Dass traveled to India through Afghanistan and a bunch of other countries. Originally, Richard Alpert, the researcher of LSD, traveled in India after becoming disappointed in LSD to a certain degree, and through karmic causes and conditions was eventually led to an incredible Hindu guru by the name of Neem Karoli Baba, who became his personal guru, who was a very powerful being, recognized as a realized being by Buddhists as well, which is fairly rare. Guided Ram Dass for a little while, And then Ram Dass came back to the US, started talking about his experiences with his teacher, and a whole revolution happened in that dozens and eventually hundreds of Westerners went to India to meet the same teacher as well, including people like Daniel Goleman, Krishna Das, and many others. So sometimes the karma is there, but what to do when we don't have that powerful karmic, thread connecting us to such a being? Well, they would take us by the hand and guide us discreetly, life by life. So in this life, someone might come to a yoga session, and at the end of that session, the teacher says, "And now think, may everyone be happy and have the causes of happiness." So we do that, and a small karmic seed is established. Although the teacher themselves, the teacher of that yoga session, would feel, no, it's just like a small thing we do at the end to make it sweet. It's actually part of the overall activities of the Buddha, because those teachings came from the Buddha. The Buddha planted a very powerful seed of influence that works through all of us. So that seed is planted, and the next life it ripens as someone reading a book. 2 lifetimes from that, they read 2 books. And then they read 3 books. And then eventually show up at the teaching. And then it keeps unfolding until eventually one is a Buddha. Very skillful causality. And the Buddhas keep track on all that. They have the control of that. So these are the 3 qualities of Dharmakaya. Dharmakaya itself is not manifest in that it's not a visible form. It's just the omniscient, all-pervading mind. It's said to pervade everything, including our mind. Within our mind is the Dharmakaya of all the Buddhas. They are inseparable from us from a certain point of view. And they cognize our individual appearances, meaning our holographic stuff, our bubble of nonsense, and our delusions and our self-doubt. They cognize everything that's happening with us from within us. They have a peek hole. They're peeking from within. They're looking from within, and they're seeing everything through our eyes. And they don't have conceptual thinking, otherwise they would be thinking, wow, well, this is morbid. Okay. But fortunately, they didn't do that. They're just looking at it with wisdom and compassion. And that's why there are many prayers in which we address our guru or someone like Tara or the Buddha or some other powerful spiritual being that we feel connection to, and we just say kien or kienno, which means you know. Sometimes it's translated as think of me or remember me, but literally just means kien, you know. What does it mean? It means that Tara knows everything that's happening with us from within us. She's cognizing it from within us at all times. We're never separated from. She's always looking through our own eyes. It's just we're not aware of her. She's aware of us. So we're reminding ourselves that she's aware of us, and we're inviting her in light, inspiring influence, so that our mental energy once again becomes more flexible, and we can bend it into compassion and love and all that. So that Dharmakaya. Then you have the Sambhogakaya, which is the first level of that energy of omniscience expressing itself for the benefit of all beings. And Sambhogakaya is a body made of light, or kind of etheric energy, you could say, light energy, and it manifests only in very high pure lens, in very high dimensions, where advanced bodhisattvas abide. And for those bodhisattvas, it manifests in this body of light that teaches those advanced bodhisattvas. So that's way above our pay grade, in a way, but not fully separated from our practice either, because there are many meditations in which we meditate on Buddhas in these Sambhogakaya forms. So some of those forms with multiple arms and heads and so forth, these are not forms we can actually witness in our world, because when Buddhas do manifest in our world, and when they manifest as humans, they have 2 legs, 2 hands, 1 head. They look like us, because that's what's familiar to us. That's what we have the karma to see. But in Pure Lands, you can have as many heads and arms and so forth as needed to teach beings, and that's how they manifest. And there are meditations in which we imagine those forms, we meditate on them, we recite their mantras and so forth. That helps us activate certain aspects of our own Buddha nature promptly. And when we do gain that realization, we'll be able to communicate with those forms, receive teachings from them directly. Very powerful. But not yet there. For us, Buddhas manifest in the 3rd body, that's known as Nirmanakaya, so Sambhogakaya can be translated as the body of enjoyment. That's the most common translation. The body of full enjoyment. Bhoga is enjoyment, general Indic term, which is also used in Hinduism as well. But Sambhoga is total enjoyment, full enjoyment. And then Nirmanakaya, Nirmana in Hindi and Hindustani in general, for example, is to build, to construct. So Nirmanakaya is a manifest body or emanated body, constructed body. That's the forms that we can actually see with our own eyes, either in a vision, if we meditate and Tara appears to us for a few seconds to inspire us. That happened to many practitioners of the past. That's a Nirmanakaya. But more so, Buddha Shakyamuni. That's a Nirmanakaya. He was walking with his feet, and people were able to see him. He was an actual Indian prince. Or great masters of our time or great masters of the past. Some of them are also believed to be Nirmanakayas, actual emanations of Buddhas. Not simply out of respect. That's the thing. We can't say, oh, she's so brilliant, she's like an emanation of the Buddha. That's more of an epithet, just a high praise, which we don't know. Is she an emanation of the Buddha? Is she not? We don't know. How would we know? But no, sometimes there is valid reasons to believe, even though that's not for us to judge, but for advanced practitioners perhaps, that someone is more than just someone with advanced qualities. They are an actual emanated body of the Buddha. And certainly Tibetans believe that. The Dalai Lama and some other great masters that are present throughout history in their different incarnations have that quality of being in Nirmanakaya. But Nirmanakaya can also manifest as statues, can manifest as stupas, and even bridges and dogs and all these other ways, because if that's necessary to guide us, Buddhas will manifest as a book, they will manifest as an iPhone, they will manifest as a bridge, they will manifest as a kettle, whatever it takes to get us there. And there's even teachings that say that the entirety of material reality as we perceive it is the manifestation of the Buddha of compassion, which means all the Buddhas at the same time in their compassionate aspect. Those the five elements themselves could, from a certain point of view, be seen as an expression of the Buddha. Those five elements still reflect back to us what our karma projects. But were we to look deeper in their nature, we would see that all of material energy is actually made of the Nirmanakaya energy of the Buddha of compassion. And that becomes quite powerful when we study such things as Eco-Dharma, which is the connection between ecology and Dharma. How do we perceive this planet in a respectful way? How do we perceive the five elements, trying to not pollute them, but to purify them? How do we perceive the trees? That's a perennial question people often ask. Well, is it true that in Tibetan Buddhism trees are not seen as sentient beings? Yes, animals are seen as beings. Spirits that might live within a tree are seen as beings. Bugs on the tree are seen as beings. Yada, yada, yada. There's many more considerations there. But is the tree itself, is it seen as a separate sentient being? In most cases not. There are exceptions, but in most cases not. But what then could be said is that trees and other plants, bushes, grass, all that, they are seen as extensions of the material energy of the earth. And earth itself can be seen as a sentient entity. There are sutras in which the goddess of earth is mentioned. She's the consciousness of the earth itself. Or all of it can be seen as manifold expressions of the Buddha of compassion, because if I were a Buddha of compassion, what I would be manifesting as would probably be trees, to be honest, because at least that's fun and they look pretty. So that's the Nirmanakaya, the manifestation body that's available to our perception. We can see trees, we can see the Dalai Lama, we can see major statues, we can see many other things. So they are available to us, they're guiding us. And then finally, the fourth body, Sambhogakaya, within the, generally speaking, Nyingma tradition, and that's the one that we've been relying on for these explanations. Nyingma Kagyu tradition, I would say, two lineages within Tibetan Buddhism. Other lineages interpret this in another way. But these two generally describe this fourth body, Svabhavakaya, the body of nature, as the union of the first three. So when we look at them, Dharmakaya is the omniscient mind, Sambhogakaya is the light body of a Buddha, Nirmanakaya is the material body of a Buddha, all the material expressions. So what unites them? They're actually all inseparable for the Buddha themselves, for the Buddhas themselves. And that union, that inseparability, is what's known as Svabhavakaya, the nature in which these are indivisible from each other. Because for the Buddha, they all arise spontaneously. The Buddha doesn't have to do like, I'm manifesting in Nirmanakaya. It's not how it works. Just natural holographic projections. So these are the four bodies. So how do we connect this to our poor selves and to our suffering? So it says here, from meditating on deceptive appearances as the four Buddha bodies. So this is a very delicate point. It's a bit complex to understand. But basically, what's said in many commentaries, and there are other interpretations available, but what's said in most commentaries on this is, when we meditate on emptiness, we can meditate on the fact that nothing has true arising. Nothing is ever truly born. I'll give a very simple explanation of this. There's much more intricate levels, but the basic explanation is, let's say you plant a seed and you want to grow a tangerine tree. There's no point, if you were to analyze each frame within time, there's no point when you can definitively say, now it's no longer a seed, now it's a tangerine. It's all random. We randomly decide. Now it's a tangerine tree, and before that was a seed. We cannot say that this is the moment when it turned from one thing to another. We could endlessly stretch that video reel, look at frames and look deeper and deeper and deeper, and still we'll have the beginning, middle, and end. And still, whatever judgment we make about that ultimate moment when the seed ceases to be and the tree appears, still just a random decision. We could label it as whatever. So because of that, there's no objectively established birth or arisal for any phenomenon. That absence of any objectively or inherently existent birth connects it to Dharmakaya, which is the empty, luminous mind of a Buddha. Then, however, still things manifest. There is in our experience a tangerine tree or suffering. And the very presence of that suffering within our personal bubble of experiences, let's say we talk about a very specific type of suffering. Let's say a headache. So first of all, for the first point, we cannot establish a moment of arisal for that headache. We cannot say, well, this is the second when headache was born. It kind of eventually came to be. But there's no definitive birth to headache. So that connects it to Dharmakaya, to emptiness. Then, yet headache is present, but it's not really truly findable. It's still empty of independent existence. It still falls apart into all these interconnectednesses, all these aspects of interconnectedness, but in itself it cannot be found. And so this aspect in which it manifests but is unfindable is like Nirmanakaya, because the body of a Buddha is manifest in our experience, but it is unfindable were we to truly look. What is the Buddha? Where is the Buddha? Is he the toe? Is he the finger? Is he the head? Unfindable. And yet manifest. So that's like Nirmanakaya. And then its inability to truly seize, because on the flip side of that timeline, the headache does not at one specific point fully disappear. We cannot once again find one frame within that video reel and say, oh, this is where it truly disappeared. So because we cannot find the cessation, the final, ultimate, objective moment of cessation, it is unceasing. We can't say it ever arose, it ever was, and it ever ceased to be, and yet in our experience it totally arose, was totally experienced, totally disappeared once we took a pill. But because we cannot find an independent existence, independent arisal, independent cessation, that absence of independent cessation is like Sambhogakaya, because Sambhogakaya bodies, these bodies made of light, never cease to be. They never disappear. They are perpetual. They will always be guiding bodhisattvas in those specific domains. And it's all beyond time anyway. So the fact that our headache is not born connects us to Dharmakaya, because Dharmakaya is unborn. The fact that our headache manifests and is yet still unfindable, not independently existent, connects us to Nirmanakaya, because Nirmanakaya bodies, like that vision of Tara, or the very fact that Buddha as a prince is walking the earth, it manifests, but it cannot be truly established through philosophical reasoning or looking into it. And then the fact that our headache is not ever truly ceasing, and yet kind of ceasing, but not truly, not independently, not inherently, connects it to Sambhogakaya. And the union of it all is the Svabhavakaya, the body of nature. As I've mentioned, this is all very complex, but it will become more obvious or more understandable when we spend more hours, more hundreds of hours, more thousands of hours on the ultimate bodhicitta meditations earlier in the text. Remember the ones when we did the oscillation, the one we looked for the self or for the agent, and all these sorts of things. Eventually it can all become more clear. If it's not clear now, not to worry at all, because we already established what to do practically in the previous part. We can just project compassion, already super powerful. We can lay all blame on our suffering onto self-cherishing and self-grasping, already very practical. Already super good. And this one will also come in time. But the next part is even more practical in a way because it teaches us very specific things to do. So that's the easiest one to teach. Transforming with our actions. And the string of aphorisms or the string of slogans here says, the supreme method entails 4 actions to use. And what's in the square brackets is actually annotation. So that's added by Dr. Berzin for our benefit, but it's not part of the aphorism. So so here are actually there are just 2 aphorisms. The supreme method entails 4 actions to use, so instantly apply to meditation whatever I might happen to meet. So as soon as we meet suffering or happiness, we would ideally transform them into a part of our spiritual practice. But what are these 4 actions to use? Well, as it says here in the annotation by Dr. Berzin, the first action is building up positive force or accumulating merit. We talked about what merit is and how to accumulate it in our mind, but we'll talk about it a bit more now. Then the second part is purifying myself of negative force, meaning purifying negative karma. Number 3, making offerings to harmful spirits. That sounds juicy and interesting. Okay, finally, some good old meddling with the devil. Okay, something like that. And then 4, requesting the enlightening influence of the Dharma protectors. So kind of sounds like witchcraft in the best sense of that word. I love witchcraft, you know. I only read 2 kinds of fiction books about witches and princesses. You laugh, but that's true. And so it's basically a bunch of princess books and the Practical Magic tetralogy on my Kindle. So this is right up there. So same with loving kindness. Why do I love loving kindness? Loving kindness is the ultimate form of magic. You know, just send loving kindness to everyone. You will dissolve all the curses. You will overcome all negativity. It's described as the ultimate protection from all bad spirits. You know, perfect. I think I told the story before, but one time when His Holiness Dalai Lama was traveling in the West, some naughty receptionists put him in a room that was said to be haunted, and many guests had haunting experiences there, like, ooh, whatever. And they did that as an experiment. They probably thought, well, like, we have the Dalai Lama, probably should put him there. Maybe it will fix the situation. And it did, because it never occurred again after he stayed there. But when they questioned him about that, he said, I don't know, I just meditated on love and compassion there. He didn't do like rituals and fire offerings and mudras and things like that beyond his normal practice. But he meditated on love and compassion powerfully, and that solved all the problems. So there we go. It's a very similar logic here. So the first one, building up positive force, entails, or merit, refers to any sort of merit-building practices within Buddhism, and just in general, because in general we create positive karma through being generous, through being non-violent, through helping others, through not harming others, and so forth. And it's also through meditating on loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, and other such things. All of these things create positive karma or merit, beneficial karma. But what can we do on top of that? There are specific techniques, special techniques in which we do different types of offerings to Buddha figures, or these imaginary figures of the Buddhas, as symbols of awakening. So let's say Tara. Tara is the female Buddha of enlightened activity, or enlightened activity manifest in the female form. And she's a Buddha also, and so she has many different forms, white form, green form, and many sets of other forms in sets of 21. There's at least 5 or 6 different explanations of how to visualize them. So people have different affinities for different forms of Tara, but most Tibetans love white Tara and green Tara as kind of the most popular form. So let's say we have some connection to Miss Tara, and we imagine her in our meditations. We recite Tara prayers and things like that. We imagine our gurus as Tara in the form of Tara. So what we could do to accumulate more merit is we could invoke Tara in our practice, visualize her, and there are guided meditations on that. We'll add them to the resource page so you can do that easily. I'm just giving an overview. So we imagine Tara, we invoke her in the space in front of us. We imagine that she's there in all her glory, shining and ready to guide us. And then we do some practices for accumulating positive karma in front of her. For example, 2 specific ones I used most commonly. One is called the 7-branch practice, or the 7-limb practice. 7-limb practice, 7-branch practice. That comes from the teachings of the Buddha in one of the sutras. And that is a sequence of 7 skillful psychological techniques. I'll list them and explain their significance briefly. So the first one is paying homage, or prostrating, or bowing down. They're all translations of the same thing. What it means is we pay homage to the beautiful qualities that are present in ourselves, in Tara, in all beings. So we basically pay homage to the qualities of wisdom, mindfulness, compassion, understanding, and all that. However, how we do that is quite often through prostrating physically, saying praising words with our speech, and maintaining the attitude of respect in our mind. So ideally, we engage body, speech, and mind, because then it becomes more powerful. So in our mind is the attitude of respect. That's the main thing. If that is absent, we could prostrate until the cows come home. Nothing's going to happen, or not much is going to happen. Something's still going to happen, but not much. So we need the attitude first, but then with our speech, we can say, "Oh, I prostrate to the noble transcendent liberator." That's one of the most famous praises addressed to Tara, and there are actually many prayers to Tara which list her qualities, and then at the end of each verse you say, "Oh, to you I prostrate." So we prostrate to the qualities that are in her, but she is just an expression of our own Buddha nature. She's not a goddess that we're worshipping. That would be independently, inherently existence. Certainly, she's no more independently existent than we are. We are existent to ourselves, and Tara is also existent in the same manner, but we are both equally dreamlike. So she reflects our own Buddha nature back at us. She can help us through that, through inspiring us with her dynamic form. So we say, "To you I prostrate," and then on the level of our body, we would sometimes do a so-called full prostration, which is when we stretch our body down on the ground. It's a form of yoga. We stretch it out and then we get up. Or a so-called short prostration. We don't fully stretch, but we just go down on our 2 knees and our 2 palms, and we touch the ground with our forehead, and then we get up. And it's done in a slightly different way in the Chinese tradition, but a very similar thing. Is just the actual physical shape of how these prostrations are done is slightly different. And then the least we could do is we could fold our hands in this mudra of prostration, or at least with one hand, or even with one finger. These are all different ways of engaging our body. So if we're trying to be discreet, let's say we came to the British Museum and we're seeing all these holy objects that are hundreds of years old. They are probably objects of reverence and faith of many people, but we wouldn't start prostrating in the middle of British Museum as us. If we were the Dalai Lama and he started doing that, he's an esteemed guest, they would tolerate that, but we might be escorted out if we start doing that. So what can we do? We just, with one finger, discreetly paying homage, but still our body is engaged. We are prostrating with our body, which is with one finger. Better than much more better than nothing. And then, of course, if we do these more elaborate prostrations, that is a very powerful practice. The full prostrations, in which we fully stretch on the ground, are said to be a very powerful way of purifying our pranas, our channels, and our subtle nervous system winds or energies. So in preparation for advanced tantric practices, one would often do 100,000 of those prostrations, or multiple sets of hundreds of thousands. And there are people who do these prostrations as their way of life, as their main practice. There are people who prostrate from one part of Tibet to another part of Tibet, or to Lhasa. There are people who prostrate from Lhasa to Bodh Gaya in India and then beyond that. These are rare examples, well, rare compared to 8 billion people. But now they're actually not that uncommon. And it's a very powerful practice if our body can sustain it. And very good for health as well. In Tibetan medicine, they say it's very good for our digestive system, very good for our nervous system. Your core muscles will be fit. And so good in all these sorts of ways. Short prostrations offer a little bit less of that, but they're easier to do. So a lot of people do those and accumulate those. And then even if we can't prostrate because we have knee issues, thigh issues, and things like that, hip issues and so forth, we could then at least visualize prostrating, but actually visualize like every step of the way, and recite the prayers and do the mudras and so forth. So that's the prostrating bit. That's the first action. What does it counteract? It counteracts our arrogance, unsurprisingly, because, me putting my face in the dirt here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the British Museum, or in front of everyone, or in front of this old Tibetan person who's teaching me? Oh, no. So it counteracts that, but it does not only counteract that, it counteracts our lack of appreciation of the qualities that we pay homage to. So it helps us appreciate, and appreciation is, as we've established in one of the previous classes, what actually is the translation of the word devotion that is often used, milpa. The attitude of devotion means the attitude of appreciating the good qualities of something. Without it, many of our practices are not truly powerful. So if we have appreciation of the powerful qualities of loving kindness, it's much more powerful, that practice that we do. So that's the prostration. The second stage is offerings. Shantideva has quite a few verses describing the visualization of the offerings that we present. You know, boundless ponds full of crystal, and bathing houses, and flowers, and mounds of aromatic substances. And so it's a huge profusion of every type of sensory pleasure that we mentally generate and we offer. Because every one of these offerings has symbolic meaning. For example, mentally offering light, or actually physically offering light on our altar. Usually we do a little bit of actual physical offerings and then lots of infinity of mental offerings. We do physical because we don't want it to be hypocritical. We don't want to be people who are sitting on gold but are too stingy to pour a glass of water for the Buddha. You know, we do want to overcome that laziness and that stinginess. But when we do that, what do we visualize on top of these humble offerings of a light here and a glass of water there and a few flowers and a tangerine and things like that? We visualize the infinity of all the good things. We transform them into their most delicious divine form. And we also visualize things that we are personally attached to. So if we are for some reason obsessed with fast cars, we offer an ocean of fast cars to the Buddha. If for some reason we are obsessed with our newest boyfriend or girlfriend, we offer billions of replicas of them, except we make them more delicious, more divine than they already appear in our visualization. If we are super attached to our family and we're constantly worried about what's going to happen to them, we offer them all to Tara, not as in like in servitude, but we mentally give up our grasping and we say, take care of them. You know, probably you know better how to take care of them. Doesn't mean we relinquish our responsibilities, but we're kind of trying to give up our grasping to the degree that's available to us. And lots of other things of that nature. There are detailed descriptions of how different mental or actual offerings create specific types of karmic connection for the future. If we want to be, for example, one day a monastic, in this life or in another life, it's good to imagine offering monastic robes to the Buddha or to the object, because that creates positive interdependence of that kind. If we want to succeed in concentration practices, it's good to mentally imagine offering food or to offer actual food to monastic communities, because food corresponds to concentration. Those who are able to concentrate very deeply don't need food. They're sustained by concentration physically. So there's a connection there. And just give one more example. Perfume is said to be the symbol for our confidence in our practice. Because perfume, let's say aromatic water, rose water, when it is sprayed over something, it makes it cool and light and pleasant. And confidence in the Dharma, confidence in all these teachings and our understanding also makes everything cool and light and breezy. So just like that, we mentally offer perfume so that our confidence, our well-earned trust and confidence towards our practice can soothe all of the burning experiences that we have. And it goes on and on and on. So that's offering. And then when we offer them, we imagine that whoever we're offering to, Buddha or Tara or Buddha of Compassion or Medicine Buddha or our teachers or a whole profusion of different objects, can be a whole ocean of holy beings in front of us. We offer it to them and they experience great bliss. That makes this part of a practice sealed. We need to imagine that they actually experience bliss. That's what completes the action. Then the next one is the so-called confession, and that is the one that is also a part of the next stage in these 4 practices that need to be done, purification of negative karma. So I'll explain it now because we're on this anyway, and then we won't have to explain it again in that bit. So in general, in the Mahayana teachings, it's said that we can purify our negative karma purify the negative compulsions in our mind, if there are 4 psychological factors present. That's from one of the teachings of the Buddha, and it became a very powerful part of this tradition. And these four psychological factors are sometimes called the four R's in English. So they are, let's see if I remember the English words, regret, reliance, remedy, and resolve. Regret, reliance, remedy, and resolve. So regret is quite literally just that, regretting that we have done unskillful actions in the past. If we know what those actions were, let's say this morning I did something mean to someone, and I remember that. If we remember that, great. But of course we have trillions of past lives of which we have no recollection whatsoever until we develop very profound samadhi, and that will open up the well of karmic memories. But until then, but just in general, we probably killed and steal. We're probably stealing, misusing our sexual energy to harm others, we're lying, we were being rude, we were sowing discord, we were chattering meaninglessly and distracting others from meaningful activities, and also we were malicious, we were greedy, or we tried grabbing others' possessions for ourselves, and also we maintained wrong views. So all the 10 negative actions that are listed in Buddhist ethics, we definitely did them. All multiple times, safe to say, and no biggie, we just need to regret the fact that we did them under the influence of ignorance, and that there are impulses still left over from that, compulsions. Because what will happen when those compulsions ripen? We will get the 4 types of karmic ripening, which we discussed when we were talking about karma in the beginning of this course. We will get a specific type of body with specific propensities, and we will be treated in specific ways by other beings, and it will all be happening in a specific environment that reflects the nature of those actions. We don't want any of that, probably. We don't want to suffer in any of these 4 ways, so we regret that. And regret is different from guilt, because guilt, in this classification, there are other ways, of course, of describing any word, but in this classification, guilt is a deluded mental state that says, I did a bad action, therefore I'm bad. That's not helpful to anyone. What is this? We're just resting in that mental state, hating on ourselves or feeling bad about ourselves. But that's not leading us anywhere, and not helping anyone either. Regret says, I've done a negative action, how can I fix that? It just looks at solutions. By accident, that's the analogy that's always given. By accident, I ingested poison. Or let's say I'm allergic to something. By accident, I had a thing that had peanut butter in it, if I'm allergic to peanuts. What can I do next? I don't know, EpiPen, need to go to the hospital, need to take a pill. There are many solutions. But I'm not sitting there hating myself for, oh, I'm so stupid, I'm so useless. And in the meantime, I'm suffocating already. That's completely useless. So similarly here, just feeling bad about ourselves, not benefiting us, and it's not benefiting the beings that we've harmed. So instead of doing that, we say, what can I do to transform it? And yes, the regret also implies that we understand the seriousness of the situation, because if we, God forbid, killed someone, well, we do need to understand how weighty of a karmic action that is, and that they did not want to be killed, thank you very much, and all these sorts of things. So regret is not simply being flippant about it. It is understanding the weight of it all, and also understanding that one of the major reasons to not do all this stuff is because beings do not like to be killed. No one likes to be killed, stolen from, raped, yada, yada, yada. So that understanding needs to be present. Then reliance is the next step that we psychologically construct within our mind, and it connects us to 2 types of objects. Reliance consists of 2 elements, refuge and bodhicitta. So reliance, which is refuge, is our way of rebuilding connection to the beings who are above us in terms of their spiritual development. It's the vertical love reconstructed. If you remember, we talked about the 2 kinds of love, horizontal and vertical. That's the terms that Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche used to use. Vertical love is devotion to those who are further on the path, our guides. Thank you very much, you're amazing, please keep guiding me. Yeah, and thanks. That's vertical love. Horizontal love is loving kindness and compassion to other suffering beings, those who are like us. I see that we're all suffering, may we all be happy and free from suffering. Thank you very much. So we need both. It's actually when both are very strongly present in our mind that bodhicitta will become much easier to accomplish. So refuge is us taking safe direction or refuge from these beings who are advanced on the path, from the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, from bodhisattvas, other types of realized beings. So us taking refuge in them is rebuilding that connection. Bodhicitta, and that's the second type of reliance, is our wish to become a Buddha for the benefit of all these other beings, to help them. So we're rebuilding our connection with them. What's the logic there? We can only do negative actions, negative karmic actions towards higher beings or beings who are on the same level as us, meaning other fellow sentient beings. To rebuild the connection with beings who are above us, we use refuge. We reconnect to them. We rebuild the bridge that we ourselves have broken. They did not break it, we did. And then horizontally with fellow sufferers, or migrators as it's called in Buddhism, we rebuild it by love, compassion, and bodhicitta. That is the fusion of love and compassion. So in this way, we mend both types of relationships. And yes, we can still apologize and so on. That's less on the karma side and more on the actual relationship side. But that's actually helpful in many situations. Or when we think it's skillful, because what we don't want to do is further traumatize someone through our awkward attempts of apologizing after many years of abuse or something, you know. They've suffered enough. So that's the reliance part. Then remedy part is simply any virtuous action whatsoever. So any virtuous activity that is done with the motivation of regret and remedy, once we have meditated on regret and remedy, we start doing something virtuous. And once we have meditated on regret and on reliance, we start applying the remedy. That can be meditating on loving kindness, on compassion, on Tonglen, on bodhicitta, on emptiness, concentration practices, generosity practices, offering practices. But in the Mahayana tradition, there are specifically practices in which to do that remedy, we recite specific mantras and we do specific visualizations. For example, there is a very popular purification practice associated with the Buddha named Vajrasattva, or Vajra being. So once again, in preparation for more advanced practices of Tantra, Buddhist practitioners would often accumulate Vajrasattva's mantra. Here's a shorter mantra and a longer mantra, and quite often the long one is recited 100,000 times or more, 200,000 times, 300,000 times, 1,000,000 times. That is recited with a specific visualization of being purified by nectar and so forth. It's said to be a very potent, skillful technique for purification. But because many people are not into mantras, or some people are not into mantras visualization, so don't yet understand how it all works, not to worry. Meditating on loving kindness would equally be appropriate here. It's just different techniques have different purifying strength and power. And there are many other practices with other kinds of mantras. So even if we're, for example, meditating on Om Mani Padme, reciting Om Mani Padme Hum with regret and with reliance, that would already be a very powerful method. And in some traditions, that's used actually instead of Vajrasattva practice. So that covers as well. That covers it as well. And finally, resolve is generating a strong resolve within ourselves. I will try to avoid these harmful actions very strongly. So if I'm regretting in particular lying, which of course lying creates very problematic ripples in our relationships with others, and also lying creates negative karmic seeds that when they ripen, they really make our life very complex. Example, one of the ways in which lying ripens karmically is that beings are disinclined to believe us. We might be saying the truth, but they're not inclined to believe us. No one is believing us. What's wrong with me, we ask ourselves. Is it the wrong vibes? Well, yes, these are the wrong vibes, but they are not coming simply from what we project right now. They're coming from this karma of lying. So if we catch ourselves in a situation like that, we might want to very, very powerfully work on purifying those karmic seeds so that our overall interdependence changes and we become more trustworthy. But part of that would be our resolve, well, I will work very hard to not lie again. And it doesn't mean I need to blurt out everything that comes to my mind, obviously. There's skillfulness to it, but I will not twist the truth. I will not misrepresent things. Why would I? It harms me, it harms others. So generating that powerful resolve seals the deal. Until we've done that, the four powers are incomplete, so full purification will not happen. And without this strong resolve being genuine, we can recite mantras and have regret and do reliance, but because we're not planning on transforming, because we're not planning to change, the full process of purification will not occur. It will still stay in our mind and we'll still dabble in the same seeds and the same compulsions, and it will go on and on and on. So when we do those, all four of those, that's what's called confession. And quite often in prayers that reflect that, and there are prayer formulas with the 7-branch practice, we would say, I confess all my negative deeds accomplished in any of my lifetimes. That's what it's done, but what is done verbally, but when we say that, we try to generate all four of those powers. Then we move on to the fourth point in that 7-fold sequence. The fourth point is the opposite of regretting or confessing. It's called rejoicing. Rejoicing is a mental state that is closely connected to one of the four immeasurables. That one is called empathetic joy. So it's a form of delight. Rejoicing is a form of delight that is experienced when we think of our own constructive actions and the constructive actions of others. So let's say we're all deadly tired by now, and we're thinking here, so what could we do? We could start prostrating, but that seems like a sweaty job right now. We could do offerings, but getting up and filling those glasses with water, even that sounds, heavy. Confessing, that sounds fun. So what could we do? We could rejoice. We could think of all the goodness we've accomplished today. I meditate in loving kindness, and I listened to these explanations, and I treated others with dignity, and blah, 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 blah. We list all the actual good things that we did, and in thinking, and each one of them we think, how wonderful, how amazing. And we try to generate that feeling. How wonderful, how amazing. We're not praising ourselves. This is not an exercise in narcissism. We're praising the good actions and the good qualities that they came from. It doesn't matter that they are ours. Everything that is virtuous requires or deserves rejoicing. And for that reason, we then turn our mind towards others. We think, wow, there were 16 other people today in the room meditating on love and kindness with me. How wonderful, how amazing. And then we saw someone else being kind today. How amazing is that? And then we think, oh, and 2,500 years ago, the Buddha taught Dharma. How amazing is that? So we allow our mind to be as expansive as possible in rejoicing in as much goodness as possible. That, of course, makes us happy, first of all. That's already great. But beyond that, from a Buddhist point of view, that strengthens the seeds of goodness very powerfully. That strengthens all these positive habits. And it does feel a bit like cheating to some people, but it's not cheating, it's just how our mind works. It's said that when we rejoice in the virtuous actions of others, we gain the same amount of positive karma that they gained by doing the action. So if someone donated $1 billion to cancer research, and we thought of that and we thought, how amazing, but we thought that genuinely, with genuine delight, we create the same amount of positive karma. We create the same positive karmic seeds. And there's whole stories about that from the lifetime of the Buddha, about a king who was able to donate a lot and a very poor woman who couldn't donate really anything, but at least she rejoiced, and how they created equal amounts of merit. Because genuinely rejoicing is sometimes harder than giving $1 billion. Because $1 billion can be given with a nasty motivation or just for publicity. Then it doesn't even create positive karma, or at least it does, but that karma would be contaminated by are grasping at reputation and things like that. Whereas to genuinely rejoice, there's no ulterior motive to it, apart from wanting to create positive karma. But when that is done with the wish of bodhicitta, that is super appropriate. We do need, in order to become a Buddha, all the positive karma we can collect. So to collect it, we'll rejoice in everything and in everyone and as much as possible. So that's a wonderful practice to do. Actually, it's sometimes said that when we finish our day, and when we arrive at the end of the day, two things to do are to regret and purify, and then to rejoice. So we think, what were my unskillful actions today? Got angry, got lazy, whatever it is that I did. I'm purifying that. And sometimes we would do a short purification practice there, reciting some mantras for a minute or two. It doesn't take much time, but very helpful. And then it helps us understand what would we like to work on tomorrow in terms of our resolve. Tomorrow, I'll be less reactive. I'll yell at people less. I'll throw less cups at them at the office. And then rejoicing. Wow, but even though I was throwing those cups, I did actually help someone. How amazing. And I did control myself that one time. Well, I know actual people who are on that, who struggle with those sorts of things. Truly, is they catch themselves not setting someone's house on fire, and then they have to rejoice in that. But it is actually valid if you are normally setting people's houses on fire because of very strong anger issues, and then this one time you were finally able to establish control over that. What a breakthrough! So rejoicing in that. So that's a good way to end our day. So that's stage 4. Then 5, 6, and 7. Number 5 is asking Miss Tara and along with her all the Buddhas, all the Bodhisattvas and our teachers to continue teaching. So we mentally or verbally say to them, please continue turning the wheel of Dharma, which means continue teaching, continue transmitting the teachings in an uninterrupted flow. Why? Because I want to absorb those teachings, practice them, realize, and then because I want to have access to them. Most people on this planet do not have access to the teachings of Buddhism or Hinduism or any other tradition of that nature. They live in circumstances where there's no religious freedom, either in circumstances where no religion is allowed at all. That was certainly the situation with the Soviet Union for a very long time. Or where only one religion is allowed and everything else is strictly penalized. Or where multiple religions are allowed, but the whole society is pervaded by deep fundamentalism. And examples go on and on and on. But another thing is that capitalism, consumerism, when all of them are brought together in this very powerful push, consume, do not think about your mind, do not think about psychology, just eat more pills and buy more iPhones. When that is happening, that is also kind of a religion that blocks us from pursuing any eudaimonic pursuits. And we are in a very fortunate situation when we have access to all of this stuff. That is something that arises through our karmic causes and conditions. So we want to keep having access to that. And we want for there to be genuinely realized qualified teachers in this world. So we ask, please stay and teach. So asking to teach is the 5th stage. The 6th stage is asking them to remain in this world. Please do not disappear from this world. Do not pass into parinirvana. Continue manifesting your nirmanakayas for all of our sake, because if this world is empty of truly realized beings, truly realized bodhisattvas, if all these incredible expressions of compassion and wisdom disappear from this world, all the great activists, all the great altruists, those who are working for peace, like these beacons of hope, if they all disappear, well, oof. And then it's us left to deal with these 32 wars and climate change and everything else. I'm barely able to manage myself. Like, I'm trying. But if these beacons of hope disappear, what are we going to do? So we need more of them. And we need them to stay. So that's what we're asking them to do, because that also counteracts our own taking them for granted. Because we take them for granted and we take the teachings for granted. So to counteract that, we asked them to teach and we asked them to stay. And then the final point in that is dedicating the energy of our practice to full awakening for the benefit of all. That's the 7th one. So prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, asking to teach, asking to remain, and dedicating. That can simply be done mentally. There are guided meditations. I have some on Insight Timer where I just mentally guide you through it. Do this, you do that, and then imagine this, imagine that. Or quite often for Tibetan Buddhist practitioners, they recite specific verses. Each verse corresponds to one of the 7, or one line corresponds to one of the 7. You recite it, you meditate on it, you move on to the next line. Recite that, you move on to the next line, one by one, slowly, slowly. Very, very powerful practice, actually often taught way before we start meditating, quote unquote, because meditation already requires a certain level of merit in our mind, certain level of mental flexibility, certain level of inspiration. So to accumulate those inner resources, we do this type of practice. And another practice that is done quite often and is very important in this tradition is the so-called mandala offering. So the word mandala itself, or mandala as it's commonly mispronounced in English, literally means circle. And there are different things that are called mandalas. In Tibetan, that's actually, the Sanskrit word was just one, mandala. It was divided into 2 in Sanskrit when it was, in Tibetan. When the Sanskrit term was being translated in Tibetan, they used 2 different words to describe 2 meanings of the same word. There's mandala. The word mandala is sometimes used to denote the divine dimension of a specific enlightened being, or a pure dimension of a specific Buddha. So when you go to, what's that called? Canary Wharf. Right now they have a mandala lab organized by the Rubin Museum. Definitely go soon because it's closing, that exhibition is closing in November. And it's kind of showing what those mandalas of Buddhas are. It's a palace in which every direction corresponds to a specific affliction that we want to eliminate. And in the exhibition, they offer you different experiments that you can do with sound, with smell, and things like that, because they're all correspondences of that nature. They're all sorts of correspondence of that nature. But basically, a mandala is then a pure dimension, and every Buddha has one. So Tara has her mandala. Buddha of medicine Buddha has his mandala, and so forth. And you would have Tibetan monastics arrive at a specific place, use colored sand to create a very, very beautiful geographic pattern that is the mandala graphically. Then eventually it will be disassembled to remind us that it's all passing, but we would still receive the blessing from witnessing it, as they say. So that's that mandala thing. But then the other kind of mandala is the one that's meant here. We mentally transform the entire universe into a pure form. And we offer that to Tara. So it's kind of, instead of individually offering water and light and flowers and this and that, we just take it all, the totality of existence, we transform it into one beautiful form, we multiply that 1 billion times if we want, mentally, and all of that, 1 billion pure universes, is offered to the object of offering. So in Men in Black, the movie, there's one of the aliens owns a little universe inside of a bubble, like a little beautiful thing. So it's the same idea. You take this entire universe that's yours, you put it into one bubble, you make it delicious instead of the trash that it currently is, relatively speaking. You transform it, and in this pure form, you offer it to the Buddhas, and depending on what the emphasis in your practice is, you recite slightly different verses for that. A very common one that's connected to this teaching that we're studying says, may all beings reach this pure land. So we transform it all, we offer it, and then we wish for all beings to actually enter a pure land of their own, or the same pure land for everyone, doesn't matter. Just may everyone's experiences be transformed from trash into divinity. So that's one way of doing it, but there are other more advanced ways of doing it, which would emphasize more strongly ultimate bodhicitta side, emptiness, luminosity, and things like that sometimes. Many, many different ways of doing it. But very beautiful practice, and said to accumulate lots of merit very fast and help really a lot with our grasping, once again. Because when we're offering that mandala, it's often done either with physical attributes in which we pour rice over a plate, and then we assemble a whole thingy that you will see sometimes in Tibetan monasteries or with Buddhist practitioners. Or we use the mandala offering mudra, which is a gesture representing this offering with the central axis and everything. When we do that, we imagine that on top of like the universe itself with its continents and all that, we offer our body, and within our body the same logic applies. The spine is the central axis, the limbs are like the continents and so on. We offer our mind in all of its movements. We offer the objects of our attachment, aversion, or anger, our friends, strangers, and enemies, the objects of loving kindness. They're all offered as well. We entrust it all, emptying it all out. Not because Tara needs any of it, She doesn't need our mandala, she doesn't need our bananas, she doesn't need our incense. She's happy. She has her own Pure Land called the Pure Land of turquoise leafed, an array of turquoise leaves. She lives in a beautiful forest. She doesn't need the tangerines from Tesco. But for our sake, we offer them, So very, very skillfully we give it all out. So that's the two super powerful special techniques for accumulating merit that I use in this tradition. Then the next one is, why is it taught here? I'm having, let's say, not a headache. That's probably too small of a thing to even bother with this, but some people would do it still. That's very high level of practice, actually, when it instinctively happens. But let's say I'm suffering from from a more serious thing. Like my gastritis, that's currently still, comes and goes. So I discovered that I have this thing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I'll try to go to the doctor and get proper treatment and change my diet and whatever else. And while doing all of that, I'm reminding myself that, yes, well, it's ripening as a purification of some negative karma, and I can now use it positively or negatively. I can turn it into compassion, wisdom, and more positive karma, or I can be a pain in the ass for everyone and create more negative karma. So the choice is mine, really. But on top of that, since this is some kind of purification that's happening, and it logically is purification, I'm exhausting some of the negative karmic seeds. To help with that, I can use these practices taught here. So to build up positive force, I will offer my body, speech, and mind to Tara as Mandala. I would do sevenfold practice many times, maybe. I will then do purification practices. That's the second point, using the four mental, the 4 R's, reliance and so forth, or regret and so forth, we just discussed them. And I'll recite purification mantras. Medicine Buddha mantra itself, although primarily used for healing, is also used for full enlightenment, and it's also a purification mantra as well. So something like that would work perfectly if I have that connection. Then for the third and the fourth one, this is where some magic comes in. I would make offerings to harmful spirits and request the enlightening influence of the Dharma protectors. So what does that mean? So of course, from a Buddhist point of view, yes, there are other types of rebirth in addition to human and animal. That's not just with the Buddhist view. I honestly struggle to think of a religious tradition that would not very confidently talk about invisible beings. The Abrahamic and the Indic traditions are very uniformly bent on that thought, but all the indigenous traditions as well. So I do not have a single tradition in which, there would be contemplatives, and those contemplatives would say, yes, we entered the deepest dimensions of consciousness, and we have validly established that there are no other types of rebirth or something like that. Because Christians believe in angels, Muslims believe in angels, Jews believe in angels, Hindus, Buddhists, and so forth, and of course the indigenous traditions, they all think about spirits in different kinds. So what do we do that? 2 options here. One more radical. We think of all the little spirits that are floating around it, probably, from a Buddhist point of view, trillions invisible beings flying across London and making us all more crazy than we already are. Absolutely a fact from a Buddhist point of view. Like lots of other invisible beings. So what can I do towards them in this third step? If I'm truly an advanced practitioner, I would say, hello everyone, I know you're flying around me. I'm a mind training practitioner. I want to develop my loving kindness and compassion. So please feel free to create as many obstacles to me as you please. They would respect that, actually, if I'm truly saying that and not just secretly being super afraid, but saying that, but please don't, So if I am genuinely saying that, they would be mildly impressed, and they might try to do something, or they might not. But it's my own mind state that says, actually, if you were to create all the obstacles in the world for me, I will just use that to take upon myself the suffering of all beings and to give to everyone my own happiness. So please feel free to create whatever obstacles you want. That's a more radical approach. If we're there, wonderful, super powerful practice. And the more we do that, and there are whole systems of practice around that, systems of practice in which we would mentally offer all the parts of our body as food for those spirits. They're not actually eat it, but it's a very, very profound meditation called Chu, or dissection, or cutting off. We're transforming our body into food for all the spirits, and we offer it thousands and billions of times. Very, very powerful system. The one system of practice in the Tibetan tradition that came from a lay Tibetan woman. She's the founder of that lineage. So there are other great yoginis that are founders of different lineages in India and so forth, but that lineage is the one that came from a lay Tibetan woman as the first master of that. Very, very, very advanced. If not, we could say, hey everyone, I'm offering you loving kindness and compassion. Please don't create obstacles for me. That's also pretty good, because we are, even though we're not brave enough yet to say, yes, do create obstacles to me, we're at least saying, hey, well, I'm offering you loving kindness and compassion. Wherever you are, whoever you are, I don't quite know, but may you all be happy as well. So that's also pretty good. Even if we ever are in a situation where we feel that someone is haunting us, the energy is off somewhere, I don't know, in a room, in a house, in a great, whatever. If we don't know of these more advanced practices of feeding these beings and, all of that, we can at least just radiate loving kindness and compassion. That will always have a positive effect, 100% confidence. And then the last one, enlightening influence of the Dharma protectors, requesting that. So Dharma protectors are beings who are responsible for protecting the Dharma. These are powerful spiritual beings. And they're divided into two classes. One is a class of enlightened Dharma protectors. They're just wrathful manifestations of fully enlightened Buddhas. So Mahakala, and there are actually many Mahakalas, or Palden who is the personal protector of the Dalai Lama, Sri Devi in Hinduism. It's kind of the same name. Palden just literally means Sri Devi. So that connects her to Durga from a certain point of view. So these are said to be enlightened protectors. They are enlightened beings. They're bodhisattvas themselves. And there are certain spirits who were just bound by great masters in servitude to the Dharma. They were subdued because they were causing trouble, and then they gave a vow to always protect the Dharma and Dharma practitioners. But even though they were subdued, they retained some of their mischievous nature, and they like to test Dharma practitioners. So they're less enlightened, at least for now. And so in addressing all of those, once again, we have two options. We can say, yeah, please remove all the obstacles from my path so that I can continue training in love and compassion. That's the easier option. Or we could say, hey, powerful deities that protect the Dharma, test me. Put me through the test so that I can progress more quickly. And that depends on our inner level of stability, because if we have reached a powerful level and we know, yes, I do want to perfect my mind as fast as possible for the sake of all sentient beings, absolutely we will feel the courage to say, yes, put me through all the tests so that I can much quicker become enlightened. If not, saying, hey, just make my path more smooth, but may keep my mind always focused on love and compassion. Don't let me forget. That's also very powerful, because the Dharma protectors, part of what they do, in addition to actually protecting the Dharma from bad people and things like that, is certainly one of the things they do. The other thing that they do is, for practitioners, they tap us on the shoulder through different things that happen to us in terms of synchronicity, and they remind us. So, I don't know, we bump our head in the bathroom and then we think, oh, compassion, things like that. Or we find the right book and so on, is also part of all that activity. But something that kind of seems somewhat uncomfortable and yet reminds us of the Dharma is sometimes said to be an expression of Dharma protector activity. We at least for ourselves can think, oh, okay, that's a reminder. They're helping me not forget about it. And yes, for some people that will just be symbolic. Yeah, Dharma protectors, whatever, I don't care. For some people that's an actual lived reality. Certainly the visionary masters that I've encountered had the ability to directly communicate with them as actual being and talk to them and be visited by them. And even sometimes Dharma protectors bring actual physical gifts to great masters, and they are under the great master's control. The great masters are the generals, and the Dharma protectors are kind of a medical force that assists them in helping us as the patients. So slowly, but these are 4 additional actions that couldn't be done. The essence of the training is to cultivate love, compassion, and ultimate bodhicitta. These are additional actions that will superpower it all. And then the next point that we will begin next time, and I think cover next time as well, is the so-called condensation of the practice in one lifetime. It describes what to do throughout our life, and it describes specifically what to do as we're dying or preparing for death. So in a way, that's one of the most popular parts of this text. And after that, we'll just have 3 points to cover, but those, I think, can be covered in 1 or 2 classes. So, yeah, we'll hope for the best. So thank you so much for your infinite patience. I know it's not been easy today, and we had lots to discuss, but may these powerful seeds ripen and bring benefit to all beings. May we always keep our mind in love and bodhicitta. So thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us online. See you soon. See you next week. Bye.